House will come to order. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendment the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 1777, an act relating to taxation. Lenczewski moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File 1777 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
Recognize the author, Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion. Mr. Speaker, if I may proceed, I just want to take 1 minute, members. We all know what's in this bill, I think, and we've all in the House been working on it for a long time. And I just want to thank you all so very much. We do know the Senate has made some changes, and I think all of us maybe like some of those and don't like others. But I really genuinely want to thank the entire House for working so hard on this. I mean, we know that the House has been really putting time and effort into this, and that's everybody. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you personally. I also want to thank the Governor, and I want to thank Senator Bach for getting us to this day today, which is to provide middle-class tax relief for Minnesotans, repeal some B2B taxes to keep our business climate more competitive, and then we have other items in the bill. But I just really want to underline to members a real gratitude to Representative Davids, who has worked with me all year to get us to this point. The Tax Committee, I think every single member voted for the bill when it was there. The floor was almost everyone, and our staff. We all know both our Republican staff and our Democratic staff and our nonpartisan staff in the tax area have really not slept. They have been amazing, and I would just ask you to join me in thanking them if I can, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, if I may, with that, I just want to genuinely ask everyone to keep working hard together here today and to approve the motion to concur so we can get tax relief to folks just as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All in favor of the motion to concur, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File 1777 as amended by the Senate.
Third reading is amended by the Senate. Further discussion. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And first of all, I want to say today I'll be voting yes on this bill. I'm proud of the fact that I'll be voting for over $1.5 billion of revenue reductions and tax cuts for the state of Minnesota, repealing some of those mistakes that happened last session, and I'm probably voting green on this today. I have to tell you, though, Mr. Speaker and members, I was trying to figure out a way to... I've read this story before, I've seen this story before, and I was trying to remember what it was, and it reminded me of a movie called The Hangover. Remember that movie, The Hangover? They wake up the next morning, they're lost, they're confused, what happened? And I can't help but think that the Democrats this session are the episode of The Hangover. They start the second year of the legislative session saying, what happened last session? What did we pass? And they look on the ground and they find the Omnibus Tax bill with business-to-business taxes, with the second state in the country to have a gift tax. And they wonder, oh my goodness, what happened? We built a $90 million Senate office building. And they're saying, what can we do to get these things done? And slowly they become ungroggy and they start piecing together the mistakes of the last session. But Mr. Speaker and members, I'm not here to gloat today. I'm not here to brag about the conservative victory we have. Mr. Speaker and members, I am glad. This is good for Minnesotans. Today we're putting more money into the pockets of working class taxpayers in this state, and we're doing it because Democrats made a mistake. Now there's a lot of things that need to be done, a lot of more mistakes that need to be done, but need to be fixed. We've taken a positive first step in fixing the mistakes of last session, and I think that trend is going to continue right through the election day, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know that most of us, or at least a lot of us at least, are basketball fans, and we filled out our brackets. And after the first couple of days starts, I don't think there's probably anybody here that has any chance at all of winning the Buffett Challenge. Any billion-dollar winners yet? I doubt it. But I want to liken what we're seeing today as the second half of a contest that started this last session. And in the first session, or the first half of this contest that we're in, the home team got slaughtered. I mean, the home team, the Minnesota taxpayer, they took it in the shorts. They really got it in terms of a $2.4 billion tax increase. I mean, it was really pretty bad. You know, you kind of wondered if the team was even going to have a chance to rally after such a thrashing like that. $2.4 billion. Well, a lot have been said, you know, and we're starting this second half, and I'm glad to see that the home team is finally putting up some kind of challenge against, the other team, by the way, is called Big Government, the Big Government team, the let's tax you on everything kind of team. But the home team is actually, it's rallying a little bit here. But it's got a long way to go. And there's a little bit more time left in this session. And if there was anything that I heard come out of the Senate conversation, was maybe there'll be another tax bill and we can fix even more of what went wrong in that first half. Hopefully. That'd be great, wouldn't it? And, in terms of the messaging, that's gone on in terms of how Republicans in the Senate have delayed this, the facts have got to be the facts. We've waited 4 weeks for some kind of action over there on the other side. And, you kind of hear, rumors, if you will, that most of this may have been probably engaged about what are we going to do with the Taj Mahal that's being built for the Senate? Shame on us and shame on them. But we've had other chances. The Republican leadership asked that when we had special session, that was like the middle quarter of that game, that we come back and we try to fix some of the damage that was done, and we didn't seize on that opportunity. So when we leave this place today and we're patting ourselves on the back, let's not forget that the home team is still really far behind. There's still time left to fix even more of the damage that was caused with that first tax bill. I only hope that we can live up to the expectations of the people of Minnesota, and do what's right by them.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know I asked this question last session when we had the tax bill in front of us. And I know Chair Lenczewski told me at that time when I asked her that the Senate office building wasn't included in this and they had to come back to the House. But I got to ask that question again because it's a burden. Would Chair Lenczewski stand for a question?
She will yield. Representative Howe.
Chair Lenczewski, the Senate office building isn't in this bill, correct?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Howe, no.
Representative Zellers, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and kind of the Senate to screw up everybody's weekend, but luckily I have great news. Privilege of the House before we get to the tax bill. Want to thank everyone for the well wishes. Especially want a very heartfelt thank you to the North Memorial EMS team. They got to find our neighborhood, so a little bit of a dicey start. And all the doctors, especially at North Memorial, who were kind enough to help my wife Kim and I with our number 3. And little Will and Reagan are happy to welcome Bennett Hans Zellers to the world, a 15-pound, 12-ounce, 19-inch long, 35-weeker. So, yeah. What did I say? Oh. Yeah, he's not 15 pounds. Well, you can tell that Mom's not the only one still excited from the thing. He was only 5 pounds, not quite the 15. Yeah. But at 35 weeks to be over 30, over the 5 pound is great. So he was a little bit early, but Mom and he are doing great, and hopefully we'll be home next week. So thank you all for the very kind wishes, and thanks also for your understanding. Just about every one of our Little Miracles has taken quite a bit of work, so we've been a little bit private with this one, just being careful. The time that it took him to be here and the extra doctors and all the care that Kim got was very critical, but it was much appreciated, your privacy in helping us. So thank you for that. However, to turn to another topic, Mr. Speaker and Madam Tax Chair, I admire you for a lot of what you've done this year. It's not fun to go through and have to redo some work that you probably didn't agree with in the first place, and really didn't appreciate, especially as we were here on the House floor, Representative Hamilton and I and a few others coming over asking about this warehousing provision that was in the Senate tax bill, and I won't betray any of our conversation on the floor, but let's just say you were about as enthusiastic as we were about this provision. It's great that there's parts of this that are being undone and that will be corrected. However, it's not enough, and it's not something you should be slapping yourselves on the back and being proud for. This was a mistake. The first part of admitting that you've done something wrong and there's a mistake is to correct it in full. This doesn't correct in full. When we were in the House Tax Committee the other day, we had a provision, the House did as well, to offer rebates, to give the money that was overcollected. If this is a bad idea, and I agree, bad idea, then give the money that you collected back. And I got to say, after being here for a while, I've heard a lot of excuses and heard a lot of parsing of words about why we can do something and how it's not possible to do something else. And, well, you just really don't understand. And, yep, I grew up on a farm, so sometimes I get that. You just don't understand, Kurt. But the excuse we heard in tax committee the other day was actually pretty shocking. It was just too hard. We'd like to give the money back, but it's just too hard. We'd have to go and find the people that were actually had to pay the sales tax. Then we'd have to find out how much they paid, and then we'd have to write them the check, or in some cases, the business owner that collected the taxes on behalf, and then give them the money back. And it's just so hard. So I asked the commissioner, I said, now, there were some folks that didn't know about this, didn't collect the taxes. In one case, several thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, one business owner didn't collect because he didn't know that calibrating medical equipment was the same as repairing medical equipment. $80,000 he had to pay out. Naturally, you go back to your client who you wrote a contract with and say, Mr. Albright, a little mistake, sorry about that, but I need another $40,000 from you for the sales tax that the folks down at the Capitol passed last July. You can imagine what his customers said to him. Sorry, the contract said this amount, I paid you that amount, services rendered, we're out the door. That guy now ate the $80,000, he has 2 less employees. So for those of you on the other side of the aisle that are skipping down the way to vote for Representative Winkler's minimum wage bill because it's going to help those poor people that need that boost in the economy, think about the 2 employees that now don't have their jobs because of a sales tax that was put into place that the business owner wasn't properly notified about, and is now not going to be rebated, so that person isn't going to have to do the work himself. That's not fixing something. That's not something you should be patting yourselves on the back for doing because it was a great deed. If it was a mistake from the beginning, which in this bill, that's what you admit in this, that this was a mistake, then you should also give back the money to the people who paid it. Not a blanket, don't give it back in sales tax or Jesse checks. No, to the people who paid it. By doing this now, another business owner I spoke with this morning said, you broke my confidence. So you're going to put it in this year, then you're going to repeal it the next year. You didn't put one in, but I had a couple of customers that say, well, wait and see on your contract until this bill's been repealed, I'm not going to negotiate the contract. So now he has to tell the people who work for him, well, I'm not sure I can give you a raise or keep your job because I'm not sure our warehouse is going to be open next month or next year, so you'll have to wait until the government acts. That confidence in their government is now lost. A lot of these provisions, even the ones that you didn't repeal, which are even worse, that are in the bill, that weren't repealed in this bill, break that confidence even more. and you've heard it on the House floor here many times from many of members on our side of the aisle, it's making Minnesota uncompetitive. When you can take, and the business owner that I spoke with this morning, I wrote it down, he actually filed for a permit in Las Vegas, $30 filing fee, went through a website, he had it in 2 days. In Minnesota, he had to hire a lawyer. I know Representative Atkins would be happy, it's full employment for lawyers. Had to hire a lawyer because of the X Corporation. Took him 6 months and several thousands of dollars. Clicking through a website, a lawyer and several $1,000s. Minnesota is uncompetitive. The taxes that were passed last year, some of which aren't being repealed, and now all of which are not going to be rebated, even the ones that we are repealing, is making Minnesota uncompetitive, and it is breaking the confidence with our business community who we want to produce jobs. If a business owner, the guy that had to pay the $40,000 in taxes, now doesn't have 2 employees, guess what he's told me he's not doing? Looking for new business. He has to do the work of the 2 employees besides the work he was doing, besides the work he was going to try to bid out, besides the expansion to his business. All of that is now gone so that he can do every single thing in the office because there's no one left but he and his wife. So if you want jobs back in Minnesota, if you're a border community, God help you. Representative Lean, Representative Marquardt, some of the folks that are on those bordering communities, Representative Shoemaker down on the South Dakota side, Representative Davids has talked many times about what happens in Wisconsin and Iowa. You fixed part of it, but you broke the confidence. You made Minnesota uncompetitive. This does not complete the circle to make us competitive again. All it's done is add yet another layer of confusion, another layer of doubt on what is my government going to do to me next as a business owner. And if this is the new bar, then this is where I'm going to set it. I won't seek to add more jobs. I won't overproduce because I hit the second tax bracket. Now I'm actually bringing home less even though I produced more. This is not making Minnesota competitive. This is a small start, but please don't run around slapping yourselves on the back thinking we've done such great work. Look at us, hear us roar. You're fixing a mistake. You should apologize and finish the job. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I am glad that finally we're seeing the B2B repeal. I am glad that we're doing the federal tax conformity. I am glad that we are repealing the gift tax and we're changing the estate tax. I'm happy for those things. I'm glad to see that we're investing in the angel investor tax credit. But we wouldn't be here today if you had listened to us last year. Because I can point to member after member after member who said to you, don't do this. This is going to harm our state. There is a better approach to take. I feel we have got a government right now that has taken your lunch, ate the sandwich, took the cookies, and took a bite out of the apple, and now is shoving it back to Minnesotans saying, here you go, this is what's left. We have. Representative Zeller's right. We have taken away the confidence of Minnesotans that they can trust their government to do right by them. Because we would not be here today if you had listened to us a year ago. We would not be here today if you had listened to us back in July when Representative Tim Kelly said we need to have a special session. We would not be here today if you had listened to us in September when we said, let's get this done during the special session. All of the time that we spent in the first 2.5 weeks of session has been spent on repealing what you guys put in place last year. We would not have to go through this pain and agony right now if you had listened. If you had listened to Strategic Warehousing, who told you this is going to hurt us. Just yesterday when she was in front of the Senate Tax Committee talking about the repeal of the B2B taxes, someone asked her the question, are you going to be able to regain the jobs that were lost? Because in her company, they had to lay off 18% of their workforce. They also sent 4,500 pallets to Iowa. And so when she was asked the question, are you going to be able to bring that back? And she said, it's going to be hard. I can't make any guarantees. So was it worth it? Was it worth it for you to go through that pain? And we're now, 9 months, 10 months later, and we're repealing it? There's some other problems with this bill. We are not helping out the middle class like we promised that we would. The marriage penalty is still in place for 2013. Why? We said that we're going to help people out. We said we were going to help out the middle class, and yet we still have the marriage penalty in place for 2013. On top of that, we have extended the upfront sales tax exemption for small businesses to next year. And I don't know, maybe, knowing this place, I have this prediction that maybe the Senate will come back next year and say, forget it. We're not even going to do it at all, or they're going to push about another year. And it's our small businesses, it doesn't matter where you're from, across the entire state, that are relying on that upfront exemption. You also have the gift tax clawback. We didn't completely repeal it. If you die within 3 years, the government can take your assets, dump it into your estate, and you're going to be paying higher taxes. That's not the right approach. And I can't bank on the Senate actually coming back with a second tax bill. If you're holding out hope to fix these things with a second tax bill, you better start talking to your Senate colleagues, because I have this feeling that they're not going to do it. And we won't be able to fix the estate tax, we won't be able to fix the gift tax, we won't be able to fix the upfront sales tax exemption, and a whole host of other things. So if you are buying the line that they're going to tell you you're going to have a second shot at this, you better get that in writing from Senator Bach. We could have done 10 times better if you just listened back in May. We wouldn't be going through this agony. Thanks, members.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And, honestly, it's with some mixed feelings that I rise on this bill. On one hand, whenever a member can vote for some tax relief and to repeal some really bad tax policy that was put into place, that's a good thing from where I stand, and I think a lot of members are going to be supporting that today. But as several members have pointed out, these are things that never should have happened in the first place. And they put great burdens on some of Minnesota's businesses, large and small. It resulted in some job losses, some missed opportunities, and good things happening in our economy that went to other states, and they're not coming back. They've gone across the borders to greener pastures, better tax policies, more welcoming policies from their elected officials, and that's just too bad. Because there was plenty of discussion about it last year, about what could happen. When the governor first released his budget and his tax proposals with some of those business-to-business taxes, the business community was very vocal and very active in informing their elected officials, their government, about what this would mean. And when promises were made that those were going to come off the table and then suddenly snuck in at the last moment, they felt absolutely betrayed by their representatives and their government. So now today is a little effort to try to repair that, to fix those mistakes, to undo some of that damage. But we know that it can't all be undone. Those jobs aren't coming back. Those opportunities missed are gone. But we've got to do something to try to provide the relief that we can. So while it's disappointing to have to take, half a loaf and a little late, and that's not the House's fault, I must say, Representative Lenczewski, Chair of the Tax Committee, you were ready right at the beginning of session with this House bill, with a House bill which was better than the one we have before us now, that's for sure. And we waited and waited and waited for the Senate to take some action. I'm not pleased with all the provisions in this bill. I can point to many provisions in it that wouldn't be the tax bill that I would write. And with the surplus of $1.2 billion, the taxpayers are absolutely being shorted on the relief that they deserve and expect. So we could absolutely do better. But we have got to start somewhere. And today is March 21st. Tax filing deadline is April 15th. and the clock is ticking down. I wondered if Representative Lenczewski would yield for a question, Mr. Speaker.
She will yield. Representative Loon.
Representative Lenczewski, when we had some discussion in Tax Committee and talking about some of these conformity provisions and about how the Department of Revenue may address the situation of those people who have already filed their taxes and now they may be subject to some of the deductions and credits from the conformity here. Could you talk a little bit about how they plan to address that? Will all the taxpayers that are affected through conformity items have to refile their taxes, or will the department be able to address some of those without another action by the taxpayers?
Representative Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Loon and members. And a simple way, I think, to think about this, and I know Representative Loon knows this, is that there isn't anyone who won't get the benefit in this tax bill if they qualify for the benefit. So certainly if you haven't filed your taxes yet, then you'll get it immediately. But if you have, one of three things will happen if you are an effective taxpayer. The Department of Revenue will either proactively fix the return and then later send an explanation letter to the tax filer telling them what they fixed. They will, that's one situation. Another is that they will request more information from the tax filer who's already filed so that they can get the tax benefit to folks. And then lastly, if there is an issue that they cannot fix proactively from their department, they will notify the taxpayer and tell them that they will need to file an amended return. So, Representative Loon, I think, is walking us through an instruction. She probably knows this, but she wants all of you to know as we go forward, I'm sure, that and I'm passing that out because she did come and talk to me ahead of time, so I want to make sure every member has that when you communicate with your constituents, that there is nobody who can receive these tax benefits who won't. And the department is going to work through that with everybody and make sure that everybody gets that. And I really do appreciate you walking through that, Representative Loon.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lenczewski. Madam Chair, I appreciate you engaging in that dialogue on this important topic because, as the days have ticked down from the beginning of session and tax day is drawing near, I've had many questions from constituents, from tax preparers, from tax filers, wondering what's going to happen, and some of the people I've talked to, they're trying to advise their clients to hold off if they have got a more complicated tax return. Some instances where maybe there was some debt forgiveness on a short sale or a mortgage forgiveness, and others that have already filed. Taxpayers are not happy generally about having to file their taxes. None of us like doing it, but it's something we all have to do. But they're even less happy when they pay someone to file their returns and then are told because of inaction or lack of speedy action by their government that they're going to have to pay again to refile. Makes them very upset, and I think rightfully so. So I appreciate being able to discuss the fact that the department may be able to take care of some of those corrections on those returns, and that they should certainly be communicating with the department in that, because the last thing we want to do is have people incur more expenses for refiling their taxes because their government did not act in a timely manner. So. Well, Mr. Speaker, I know others want to speak on this bill, and there's much to say about it, but again, a third to half of a loaf, I guess I'm going to decide is better than nothing today, but I certainly hope that as this session continues, we are going to fight for more relief for taxpayers. There is certainly much more room for action on many of the tax items in terms of giving relief to those taxpayers who need it, taxpayers who deserve it, and who expect it. They've overpaid. There's a $1.2 billion surplus. We need to give it back to them.
Representative Leidiger. Or, excuse me, Representative Abler. Yeah. Confuse you often.
Mr. Speaker, we go out in public and it's like, which of you is which? It's amazing. Thank you. It's been a long day, and a lot of you are happy the tax bill is finally here. I do want to also share my excitement for Representative Zellers' new son and how exciting that is, and what the challenge. This is the good old days, just to remind you. They get older, and then the other things happen. But they eat a lot and they hurt their knee. And anyway, but it was really nice to hear how that when he needed some help, there was a rescue team available to make sure that they were safe and secure. And I want to thank Senator Bach, actually, and Representative Lenczewski for creating the Minnesota Worker Rescue Bill here. And so this is actually good news for the Minnesota workers. I know a lot of you care about the minimum wage and $9.50, and that'll be good for some people who are living in just desperate straits. But a lot of the jobs that we're going to leave were jobs that actually paid good money, good benefits, salaries you'd be happy to have your son get to have the job at. And these companies were about to go, and some have already left. And so for those that are still here intact, I'm happy that we can be celebrating this bill today. And I actually, Representative Lenczewski, I've been trying to read these tax bills every year, and it's 16 years, I'm finally getting better at it, and thanks for having a shorter one. I realized it wasn't your bill. Yours was longer. I think there was refunds in it and all that people were looking forward to. But on page 50, I found an oasis. I found the human service section of the tax bill. And so we've been talking about human services on the tax floor, and just having spent so much time on this topic, any day we can get people engaged in talking about the health and welfare of our citizens, it's a good day in Minnesota. And so, but it's a good day, Representative Lenczewski, actually not for you, Bloomington has not boomed under the Lenczewski era. They have not gotten a lot of largesse. I mean, not specific ones. I mean, they've done fine, like Anoka's done fine, and you can't really pick out the Bloomington provision, but you can pick out the Beltrami provision of this bill from Senator Skoye, and it's worth $3 million for Beltrami County. And we were talking about the targets. We want to get more money for the 5%. And where do you get the money? The target, Representative Carlson said the target's been set, and we said we hope we can find the money. Well, there was a problem in Beltrami County. They had some out-of-home placements, and so Senator Skoye said, not a problem. I'll just take $3 million a year for a decade and give it to my county. $30 million. Now that's, Mr. Speaker, is how you find money. You just get the chair going, and you work within a target, and you find money, and you do stuff you never would have done in a bill. And so there are problems up in that neck of the woods, Mr. Speaker and members. But if you were going to actually try to help Red Lake with its out-of-home placement problem, you'd actually bring it to our committee, and we would do what the department told me they would have done with this money, was actually set up a program to help the tribes serve their individuals better. But instead, this money is going right to the county. So there you go. And you got to be, I commend the senator on his, brazenness and on his commitment to his own neck of the woods. So, members, when you vote yes today, I know your counties have some troubles, and I know you're with the 5% and all that, but at least you can vote yes, knowing confidently that Beltrami's County out-of-home placement system is going to be fully staffed, and that whatever they got to do with that money, they're going to be squared away for $30 million. So you can easily vote yes. Thank you.
Representative Anderson, the other one. Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill reminds me of some of the unsession bills we've seen that I call it a good start, that we have gone partially on the road of correcting something, and this does do partially that, but we need to do more. We've also heard speakers talk about mistakes, and sometimes mistakes can be in the eye of the beholder, but I think one mistake that we pretty much all agree on was the sales tax on the repair of farm machinery. And I've seen some of these $30,000 or $40,000 repair bills this past half a year or so, and we told farmers, hang on to your receipts, we hopefully can get a refund to you. And I think even the bill we passed out of this chamber a couple of weeks ago had refunds for that. But now this bill comes back today. It does not have the retroactive refunds for commercial repair sales tax. And that's disappointing. We're certainly glad that the sales tax is finally going to be going away, but we had the hope that this would have gone back to last July 1st, and it would have given our farmers and other commercial repair folks the refunds that we had talked about giving to them. Also a concern about the estate portion. It doesn't take very many acres to get up to $1 million, and there are provisions for farms kept in the family, farmed for 3 years or so, but The 1 million slowly going to 2, and we had heard up to 5 million, but that's not in this bill either, is a concern to those that farmers and such who would have a fairly large estate. But thanks for what has been done. We need to do more work, and let's continue on and do that. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Yeah, I rise to appeal to the body that one of the things I've learned since I've been here is we both want additional tax revenues, both sides of the aisle. Now, our side would like to reduce taxes and regulations with that additional tax revenue. Your side tends to want to grow government and grow some of the government programs. And that's an honest debate to have, members. But the question is, if we both want higher tax revenues, what's the best way to get higher tax revenues? And the good news is we have a bipartisan solution in our history that tells us which way to get higher tax revenues. We can look at John F. Kennedy. When he cut taxes back in the 60s, no one in government predicted, according to what I've read, the exponential growth of tax revenues that came into the federal treasury. When Ronald Reagan cut taxes, nobody predicted in government that the exponential growth of tax revenues that came out of the private sector based on those tax cuts. So the reason nobody in government predicts that is because there's two ways of scoring economic growth and tax cuts. One is static, which is what the government uses, and it generally means you're going to be precisely wrong, okay? The other is dynamic, and that means that you're going to be approximately right. And the sad part is that if we don't reduce taxes and regulations in our state, we're going to have a difficult time seeing the type of growth in our tax revenues that will actually be able to meet the needs of the demographic changes that we're seeing. I'll give you thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll give you one last personal example from a business that we visited here a couple of years ago, right here in the metro area. It's owned by an elderly gentleman. He started it in his house. It's a technology company, and it's grown to probably about 25, 30 employees. And we met with him and one of his executives, and they shared with us that 51 cents of every business dollar they generate goes for state, local, and federal taxes. So 51 cents of every dollar, this is before the tax increase, members, okay? All right, now he's an elderly gentleman. They do most of their sales in the Asian area, and he gets a regular call from over countries in Asia to move his business over there. The last call they had when we visited that business was from Singapore. If he were to move his business to Singapore, instead of paying 51 cents of every dollar in taxes, which he currently does here in the state of Minnesota, he would be paying 17 cents of every dollar. So let's assume, I don't know what their sales were, but let's say it was $50 million. Well, at 51 cents, he's paying over $25 million in taxes here in the state of Minnesota. Over there, he'd be paying about $8.5 million, if my math figured right there. And then he'd have that much more to raise the wages for his employees, that much more to invest in it and grow his business, grow additional jobs, and generate additional tax revenue for the state of Minnesota. So, members, he's an older gentleman. He's well into his 80s. He doesn't want to move his business to Asia. But the point is this: he's going to one day retire or have to leave the business. The new young people that come in and buy that business are going to look at that bottom line and say 17 cents of every dollar in taxes or 51 cents. And it's not going to take them very long to decide to move that business someplace else when it generates millions of additional dollars of revenue for the business to grow. So, members, my appeal is we're moving in the right direction, okay, by reducing taxes. Let's keep moving that direction, restrain the growth of government, equal at least to the private sector, and you will see exponential growth in tax revenues. And you'll be able to do the things that you want to do for your schools, for your elderly, and for so many other people that are in need in the state of Minnesota. So I urge you members, let's adopt economic philosophies that actually increase tax revenues and not punish our job creators and businesses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Representative Zerwas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I think I would agree with a lot of the folks that have spoken already that have expressed some optimism about the ability to correct some of last year's errors and the errors of your way. However, there are things not in this bill that are of grave concern. Last year, with Chair Lenczewski's leadership, we were able to include within the tax bill the local sales tax exemption. And we all walked out of there thinking that that was going to include all units of local government and certainly wouldn't punish local units of government that operate efficiently within joint powers or special districts. Now, Revenue decided in their wisdom that that wasn't the way the bill was written, and so we came together in a bipartisan way to tell local governments and local communities that if you work together, if you bond together, if you reduce your costs and spread efficient services across multiple communities, we're not going to punish you. We are not going to punish you. And unfortunately, members, no matter how bipartisan the effort was, that is not included in today's Senate language and in the bill. And so I am very hopeful, as a few others have said, that we can have a second run at this, that we can get a second tax bill, that we can motivate the Senate to have a second attempt to fix a mistake that wasn't our mistake, and it wasn't the Senate's mistake last year. It was the Department of Revenue's mistake, and we need to go the extra mile to fix that. And one other thing, if you look at the location equity portion of what the Senate did in this tax bill, I know there's winners and losers and everything. And as Representative Abler reminded us last year, Elk River, he said the Elk River School District was a district of no hopes and no dreams. That was his comment as he looked at what the formula did to Elk River and the Elk River District. And in this tax bill out of the Senate, while nearly every other district is benefiting from the change in the equity, Elk River is again penalized and will receive less money and be harmed by this bill. And so, members, for my area and for my district, this is a step backwards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to point out one small issue in this bill that is actually made a little bit worse. There's a number of issues that are improved, and we're happy to see that, and I intend to vote for the bill. But there's an issue of property taxes on conservation lands that is actually being recodified in this bill, and it's a mistake, frankly. I've talked to virtually every environmental and hunting and fishing group in this state, and they all favor the ability to lower the level of value for conservation lands that are enrolled in various conservation programs. When a farmer enrolls some land in a conservation program, he agrees to quit farming it forever. And the benefit in the past has been that he would have his property taxes reduced by most assessors across the state. Last year's tax bill changed that, and this tax bill actually recodifies that by putting a date in there. This will result in potentially side-by-side parcels of non-riparian land being taxed at different rates. A person who enrolled his land some years ago will have a low rate of property taxes. Someone who's enrolling their land this year will have higher property taxes. To me, this is ultimately unfair and an improper use of our system. I'd like to see this changed, but it's already been rejected by our property tax division here in the House, so I don't think it will be addressed this year. There is an issue of property taxes for our local governments that have a lot of land in conservation acres that we do need to take a look at, but this is one issue where we're going backwards in this tax bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's nice that you get everybody's attention when I'm speaking like this. I apologize for my voice. Many of you know that I have an office right next to Representative Zerwas, and you can see what's happened to me. I'm glad he's not here. I'm going to be brief, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for recognizing me. I just want to say thanks to the hardworking people of the state of Minnesota. Without them lighting up the switchboards and emails here in St. Paul, I don't think that this would have happened. I think there was a tremendous appetite to spend other people's money, to take money out of their pockets, and now we're seeing what happens when that does happen. And I'm very appreciative to the good people of the state of Minnesota. I'm thankful that we are doing some of this stuff today. It's a step in the right direction to correct some of the problems that were created last year. The problem is excuse me, the problems that were created caused a severe gash, and the bleeding that started to happen is being treated with a Band-Aid instead of a tourniquet. So let's not get too happy about what we're doing here today. There's still several problems that have been pointed out that we need to fix, and let's keep working together to get that done in the future. Thank you.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is unfortunate, not unusual, to have to go back and fix legislation. And we should feel good about going back and doing this untaxed bill and correcting and fixing, something that the people helped us realize and frankly should have avoided. But during my lifetime, I've made mistakes. I've not listened to advice. And when I realize it, I go and fix it. But I also do the next step is, what can I learn? What can I learn from this mistake? And frankly, this chamber works best when we have a good debate. We listen to all sides. But one thing we lost with the rule change is, during that debate, we can frequently come to a compromise. We can see the two sides, and we can come to a compromise and improve that bill. In the past, we could do it with an amendment from the floor. And I just think that if we bring that back, that'll allow us to avoid these mistakes. We wouldn't have to go back and correct legislation as often. We could do it here on the floor. And I hope that we can learn from this and improve, so that the rest of the session we can work together, do the people's work, and avoid some of these mistakes. Thank you.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to talk about a few issues. However, Representative Zerwas already covered one, and he covered it amply well. And I, too, share the concerns about punishing the efficiency of our communities in operating under joint powers agreements. But more importantly, I'd like to talk about the direction where we go from here with regard to how we treat Minnesota business, how we encourage jobs and economic activity, and to create a healthy and vibrant economy. Because as Representative Gruenhagen has already said, and I fully agree, when we have a healthy and vibrant Minnesota economy, we have revenues, and we also create jobs. And the more we have economic activity, the more money changes hands, the more revenues come in, sales tax, income tax, etc. But last session, I did mention that just because you levy a tax doesn't mean you'll collect it. Well, I was partly wrong and partly right. I was wrong in that you folks did pass massive increases in taxes and levies, and you did collect the money, and the revenues certainly have demonstrated that. But I was also right with regard to the fact that we are driving away our parents and our grandparents out of the state, seeking what is now a fourth tier of income tax. And I'd like to point out that the fourth tier income tax hits hardest the smallest business. Most of our businesses are organized under sub-S corporations, they're organized under LLCs, and the ordinary profits or the ordinary income, the income that is used for capital formation to grow and expand your business, flows through as ordinary income to the individual. Even though that individual didn't take that as salary, the residual is still taxed as income and punishes hard a business to want to get ahead and create more jobs and more economic activity. So this fourth tier of tax is making a difference and is continuing to drive the smallest businesses out of the state. Just this week, we had the members of the CPA Association coming here, and their direct testimony said that they have prepared numerous returns where people are exiting the state. And the fact of the matter is, folks, the damage has been done. Once they're gone, they're not coming back. And it's going to take a while to get this economic activity going. All business asks for is economic certainty. They just want to know the rules that are going to be played by and that they can be competitive with the other states. And right now Minnesota has shown that with regard to the tax incidence and the cost of doing business, we are not competitive. And we need to go forward from here, making sure that we have a little bit more reverence for those who are the economic job creators and create the revenues that we all would enjoy here to take care of the mission of taking care of the people's work. So with that, I'll yield. Thank you.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was wondering if Chair Lenczewski would rise for a question.
She will yield. Representative Albright.
Representative Lenczewski, I'm looking at the bill on lines 43.4 and also then to the effective date, which is on 43.16 and 43.17. And as we all agree, reading bills is very, very important, and so I've taken that upon myself. And as I would read this, understanding what was passed out of this chamber some time ago, I'm wondering whether or not we have a conflict. Because as I read it on 43.4, it says, made by the decedent within 3 years of the date of death. But then down on 43.16 it says this section is effective retroactively for estates of decedents dying after December 31st. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to Representative Lenczewski is whether or not the state could go back to an example of someone that dies on January 1st of 2014, whether or not they could claw back to January 1st of 2011 any gifts made under the clawback provision still remaining in the bill.
Representative Lenczewski. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Albright, I know you've worked on this a lot, and I'm trying to read this, and as you know, the Senate, this is their, they get to deliberate just like we did, and this is their choices, and some of this language is from revenue. So we talked in taxes about eliminating the bubble, or the balloon, whatever you want to call it. That's part of it. So Minnesota is setting new rates to do that. They're getting to $2 million. The governor had different ideas about how to get to the $2 million exemption quicker, and so some of that's going on. But then additionally, you're talking about the 3-year look back and how that times out. And I have asked about that, and we do think there might be a little bit more work to be put into tax bill 2 to just get every little technical amendment right. I would love to work with you on that, because I think while you would prefer to go to 5, my guess is you like the gift tax repeal, you like the balloon going away, and you like to ramp to 2 as quick as you can get there. But this question of the timing of the 3-year look back, I think is something that I personally want to spend a little more time on. But we in the House, we just get to vote yes or no today. And and I should mention, this bill is really, the governor had things he wanted and didn't, the House did, all of us, and the Senate. And this really is a compromise between the 3 entities on what we can get done for taxpayers here today. But I do think some of these more complicated provisions, and you're one of the members who understands them, in great depth, I would like to work a little bit, see if we can't, see if there's anything that got not quite right to work with the Department of Revenue and the Senate to see if we could, in a consensus way, make correcting changes. But I think substantively, if you're looking for a big philosophical change, we probably wouldn't be going there. But if you know, and I will tell you honestly, some of the discussion that was going on is if revenue provides detailed technical changes to language, whether it's on a Senate bill or a House bill, and depending who the author was, it gets pretty complicated pretty fast. And you're right, if you read the amendments from the Senate in the one piece and then you read the actual bill, because there's two different items on our desk, it is a little confusing, but I would look forward to working with you on that. I think it's mostly technical, and I'd be interested to hear you respond to what I've just said. So thank you.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that Representative Lenczewski, I think you and I can agree that we shouldn't trust the Senate with regard to getting it right. And so I do look forward to working with you on the details, because as I would see them, I think as it would pertain to small businesses and farmers, this clawback provision, as some of my colleagues have shared with you already, is quite troublesome. And it is about the details, and so I do look forward to tax part 2. And so we'll leave it at that for now, Mr. Speaker, and look forward to the next iteration.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Just very quickly, I'd just like to say that I'm glad that we have a system in which mistakes can be corrected and recognized and fixed, a redo, if you will. We've had a Minnesota miracle, and now, to use a golf term, we have a Minnesota mulligan.
Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I got a text message from a constituent, and I just want to quickly read it. He said that I wanted to hire another employee this year, but my accountant said my taxes went up $25,000 due to tax increases. No extra employees, I guess. Members, last year the Republicans offered a lot of different ways that we could help our citizens of the great state of Minnesota out. A lot of ideas that were rejected by the other party. And now here we are today, fixing the mistake of the past. But it's okay to say I'm sorry to the taxpayers that you're having to do this. And maybe this is your way of saying I'm sorry. You know, with kids, when they make a mistake, you tell them what you did, or they did, and then you ask them to learn from that mistake and not happen again. And so I hope to you on the other side of the aisle, learn from your mistake, and that the taxpayers can say, well, let's hope this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would like to, first of all, thank Chair Lenczewski. As I go through my bill summary, I see a lot of federal conformity, maybe not as much as some of us would have wanted, but there's a lot of it there. And you know what I think about federal conformity. That's something we certainly want to try to do. But let's take a look back just a few days. I too want to thank Chair Lenczewski and Speaker Thiessen and the governor for a few things here. We came into session February 25th, and by March 6th, less than 10 days later, we had a tax bill. We had a very good tax bill, went over to the Senate. I kind of felt like Speaker Thiessen brought out the shiny 40-20 John Deere, and Chair Lenczewski put about a 2-bottom plow on there, and we were moving. But then what happened? It goes to the Senate, and they switched out the 40-20 with the John Deere being put a 10-bottom plow on it. That doesn't work too well. I'm very disappointed with the actions of our Senate. I think the House acted in a bipartisan manner on March 6th of 2014 with a 126-2 vote. But now we're here today. There's some very good things. One concern I do have, we should not forget that we had a $2.4 billion tax and fee increase last year, and this is correcting about, we're kind of cleaning up a mess here a bit, about $450, $460 million. So As I've said in the press before, I said, if I don't get my way on the whole thing, I'm not going to take my toys and go home. I'm going to support it. And that's what I've done. I hope this House has learned a lesson, members, that never again will a business-to-business tax darken the door of this House of Representatives. And to Governor Dayton's credit, when he first came out with his budget in 2013, what did he have? He had a lot of business-to-business stuff in there. He was taxing health care for sick puppies and kittens. He was doing all sorts of things. And he went around the state. And people said, don't do this. Business-to-business taxes are a really bad idea. And to the governor's credit, he listened. And they were gone, we thought. They were gone from the House tax bill. But they came back from the Senate. I hope we've learned a lesson here. Business-to-business taxes are a really, really bad idea. And I think we've learned our lesson there. And I think that's a good thing. So we go up to the line in the sand of 314 that the governor put down. Nothing happened. We go up to 319. We pass that deadline. But again, to the governor's credit, his press conference of Tuesday hooked the 40-20 back onto a two-bottom plow, and off we went. And so we're here today. Members, tax policy affects behavior. It affects behavior. And even though the warehouse tax isn't even in effect yet, it's done a lot of damage. And I don't know if we can recover from that. Warehouses that should be built in Minnesota have been built in Iowa, have been built in Missouri, have been built in Wisconsin, have been built in South Dakota, North Dakota. That should have been Minnesota business. And members, I am terrified, horrified, and mortified of the black cloud on the horizon that is going to kick more jobs out of the state, called the minimum wage increase. That's a discussion for another day. Representative Torkelson, thank you for bringing out the conservation easement situation. If environmentalists want more farmland going to conservation easement, we sure didn't promote it here. We may have shut it down. Upfront capital equipment sales, delayed till July 1st of 2015. I can see another delay on the horizon. That is something that could really get a business going if we would do it now. So, this is a repair bill, but I'm all for fixing things, and this session isn't over. We have till into May, and Chair Lenczewski, thank you for this, and I hope working together we can do a whole lot more. So I'm voting green. Somewhat disappointed. It kind of reminds me of when you go to Vegas and you see the big billboard that says 95% returns. That means for every dollar you put in there, you can earn 95 cents back. Or it kind of reminds me of the farmer who was losing $1 a hog. He says he's got to increase production. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A lot of things here don't make a whole lot of sense. We didn't do enough. But Chair Lenczewski, as we continue in tax committee, let's make it. Let's work together and make it even better. So, members, vote green and have a good weekend.
Representative Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Davids. Again, really, your leadership in your caucus is so important this year, and really appreciate it. I would be remiss if I didn't I failed to mention Representative Murphy has been just such a strong leader in getting this bill through this year. I also want to highlight the work of Commissioner Franz, all of the staff in the Department of Revenue who've been working with everyone, the folks who are working in the governor's office, and I had mentioned before, of course, the governor, Senator Bach, but I also want to mention Senator Skoye. He is just such a delight to work with, and Senator Rest, and we all don't agree on everything. But what's important here, members, and I'm pleased to say, is that all four caucuses have found a way to come together on this and with the governor, and I think we should feel good today that we will be putting into law middle-class tax relief after we take this vote, and I thank you so much, members.
Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's been a long time waiting to get to this point. It's been a year since Democrats put these damaging tax increases into place. And this bill is a good start, but it falls woefully short. It doesn't undo the damage and the chaos that these tax increases have caused to Minnesota families and to Minnesota businesses over the past year. Minnesota businesses have left the state of Minnesota because Democrats put these tax increases in place. And these are real opportunities that Minnesota families have lost. Minnesota farmers and Main Street businesses won't see $55 million in refunds from a retroactive repeal of Democrats' damaging sales tax on equipment repairs and telecommunications equipment. And Minnesota families will have to wait a year to receive deductions and will lose out an average of $112 per family because we haven't done the marriage penalty for 2013 instead of 2014. And after today's adjustment, Democrats have still increased spending by over $1,500 for every man, woman, and child in the state of Minnesota in this budget. And that number is still likely to grow. One of the largest tax increases in Minnesota history, and after this small adjustment, Democrats have still increased taxes this biennium by over $300 for every man, woman, and child in the state of Minnesota. And while Minnesota will have a budget surplus, Minnesota families still do not. Even more disappointing, Minnesotans learned this week that Democrats have been delaying passage of this tax relief because of internal party dispute over a $90 million state office building, which actually looks likely now to happen. While Republicans have respected all along the hardworking taxpayers and Minnesota families, and we've been here since day one, standing up for them. Last year, we voted unanimously against these damaging tax increases. And while Republicans weren't part of the problem, we absolutely will be part of the solution. But I'll tell you what, Democrats, your silence here on the floor today isn't going unnoticed. And the mistakes that you made last year that we're going a little ways to fix today will also not go unnoticed by Minnesota families. Many of you know I have a black lab named Lucy. She's almost 2 years old, and while I think she's a perfect dog, once in a while she makes a mistake. She does something she's not supposed to, and I can always tell. I see the long face and the long eyes. She puts her tail between her legs. And I'll tell you what, while we've heard Republicans stand up today and talk about the right direction for Minnesota and what we need to do to build Minnesota's economy and build Minnesota's families and middle class, Democrats sit silently, like my dog Lucy, hoping that I didn't notice their mistake. But Minnesotans will remember, and they do know the damage that these tax increases have caused, and they do notice that we're only going part way to fix these damaging mistakes. What Minnesotans expect you to do is say you're sorry. You owe Minnesota families an apology, not just for the damaging mistakes over the last year, but for the mistakes that go unfixed that you put in place last year. You owe Minnesotans an apology.
Representative Murphy.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker and members. When I was younger, I used to love to watch the movie When Harry Met Sally with my mom. And there's this great scene in that movie when Harry and Sally are having an argument. And Sally says, "Who is the dog in that story? Who is the dog? Am I the dog in that story? I sure hope not." I want to thank, in the movie it went worse, but I'll leave it at that. I want to thank Representative Lenczewski, for sure, and Representative Davids, and the members of the Tax Committee for all the work that you've done in this very first month of the 2014 session. And by now, if you listen to me, which you often do, you know that I'm an optimist. And we see issues differently, and we give those differences voice on the floor of the Minnesota House as we have today. It's no different today. As I talk with you about what we're going to vote on in just a few minutes, I see $508 million in middle-class tax cuts, and I think that's good news for Minnesota. That's good news on top of our growing economy. It's good news on top of strong job numbers, and I feel and experience genuine optimism about our future, and I know Minnesotans do as well. The reach of these tax cuts are wide, to married couples and working families and students and small employers and farmers, and that's good news for more than 1 million Minnesotans. I am a glass half full about us and about our ability to make decisions about our future and Minnesota's future. This is our first act for 2014. I'm glad we're finally here. Please vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions and resolutions online and at the desk. If there's no objection, we'll take up those motions first. Hearing no objection, those motions are adopted.
Paymar moves that House File 2144, now in the General Register, be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Representative Paymar.
Mr. Speaker, that's my motion. This bill has a fiscal cost and for the safe harbor sexual exploitation monies for this year, and it needs to go to Ways and Means.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Garofalo moves that House File 2884, now in the General Register, be referred to the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection, Finance, and Policy.
Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker and members, the Department told us this bill has a fiscal note. The Chair would like to see it, so it's going to Commerce.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Allen moves that House File 3027 be recalled from the Committee on Health and Human Services Policy and referred to the Committee on Early Childhood and Youth Development Policy.
Representative Allen.
Mr. Speaker, both chairs support this bill. House File 3027 is the Children and Family Services Policy Bill. The bill amends, clarifies, and makes technical corrections to programs within the Children and Family Services Administration at DHS.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Mariani moves that House File 3175 be recalled from the Committee on Education Policy and referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Policy.
Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spoken with Representative Liebling about this. What this does basically is it aligns that bill with the similar pathway that it's following in the Senate. It's flowing through the Health and Human Services, and both chairs are in agreement that that's where the bill should be in the House as well.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Any announcements? Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Health and Human Services Policy will reconvene in 15 minutes after session ends.
Representative Nelson.
Government Operations Committee will reconvene at 1:45. And the bill we're taking up first is the Huntley bill, so hopefully the author will be there so we can get it done.
Representative Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the House.
State your privilege.
Mr. Speaker, again, I got a message from Mrs. Zellers. Again, Bennett Hance is 5 pounds, 12 ounces, not the 15 pounds. And wanted to thank our Dr. McAvoy and the fine Maple Grove police officers that gave us a little bit of a speedy escort to the hospital. Each and every day we see them in our communities, and it means a lot to us. But when you need them the most, and when they're there, the North Memorial EMS team as well, thanks a million, guys. You had us at a very scary time, got us there, and Ben is a very happy boy because of it. So thank you again, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I didn't get up to announce the weights of babies, but I do have 3 children, Representative Zellers, and they were 9, 4, 10 something, and almost 11. No, the monthly 3. But the youngest is 37, so that's a long time ago. What I'm really up for, Mr. Speaker, is being it's the weekend, just as a reminder, Ways and Means will convene promptly at 10 o'clock Monday morning, and we have several bills that will be up. So if members can get there on time, we can hopefully get done in a timely manner. Thank you. In room 200.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3 p.m. Monday, March 24th, 2014.
Representative Murphy moves that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn until 3 p.m. Monday, March 24th, 2014. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Representative Murphy.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Murphy moves that the House do now adjourn. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. Monday, March 24th, 2014.